In this video, we're going to talk about things that can move entire demand curves. But let's first review what a demand curve is. A demand curve shows you the relationship between price and quantity demanded. Quantity demanded is just how much of a good people want to buy. So say the price of a good is 20, if quantity demanded is 5,000, then people want to buy 5,000 units of this good because the price is 20. Now, as you change the price of a good, you move along the demand curve for that good. By definition, you do not move to a new demand curve. So changing price moves you along a demand curve, doesn't move you to a new demand curve. Demand curves are two-dimensional. That means they can only take into account two things that are changing, and the two things by tradition that change along a demand curve are the price of the good and quantity demanded. This means that along a demand curve, we're assuming everything else but the price of that good and the quantity demanded for that good remain constant. This is what's known as the ceteris paribus assumption, or other things being equal. So if we raise the price of Pepsi, we're assuming everything else about Pepsi stays the same if all we're doing is moving along the demand curve for Pepsi. So if you change something that matters for the quantity demanded of Pepsi, other than the price of Pepsi, you need to move to a new demand curve. Now let's explore things that move entire demand curves. Substitutes. Substitutes are two goods where you usually want one or the other. So Coke and Pepsi, cars and bus tickets, or two different styles of couches are all substitutes. With a substitute, as one becomes more expensive, people will tend to shift towards the other. Or as one good becomes cheaper, people will shift away from the now relatively more expensive good to the cheaper good. The demand for a good is higher, or you shift the demand for a good to the right if you raise the price of a substitute. So we have a higher demand for Coke if the price of Pepsi is high. And this should be intuitively clear to you that, you say you like cola flavor, well, you're more likely to buy Coke if Pepsi is more expensive. So you can imagine there's lots of different demand curves for Coke. Each demand curve for Coke corresponds to a different price of Pepsi. And with, the farther out you are to the right with your demand curve, that must correspond to a higher price for Pepsi. In general, if we raise the price of a good substitute, we shift the demand curve out, we shift it to the right. And if we lower the price of a substitute, we reduce the demand for the original good, or we shift it to the left. Complements are the opposite of substitutes. With a complement, if you get one good, you are more likely to want to get its complement. So hot dog and hot dog buns are complements, cars and gasoline are complements, and cats and cat food are complements. With complements, when you lower the price of a complement, you raise the demand for the original good. So if you're more likely to buy a hot dog if the price of a hot dog bun is low. So the demand for hot dogs shifts to the right or increases if we lower the price of hot dog buns. Or you can imagine there's lots of different demand curves for hot dogs, each corresponding to a different price of hot dog buns. And the lower the price of a hot dog bun, the further to the right is the demand curve for hot dogs. Your income can also affect your demand for a good. If you get richer, you might buy more or less of a given good, or if an entire country gets richer, it might buy more or less of a given good. Now, normal goods are defined as goods that you buy more of as you get richer. So obviously, caviar and yachts are normal goods, but it turns out that most things, not all, but most things are normal goods. And it kind of has to be that way because as you get richer, you're going to be on average buying more of most things. With normal goods, you have a greater demand the richer you are. So if we increase income, we would shift to the right or increase the demand for caviar if caviar is indeed a normal good. Some goods are inferior, and inferior goods are goods that you're less likely to buy the richer you are. So used clothes, bus tickets, and ramen noodle dinners are probably all inferior goods. Now, eyeglasses, interestingly, they're probably inferior goods today in rich countries because of laser eye surgery, but in very poor countries, eyeglasses might be normal goods because you live with bad vision if you can't afford any type of vision correction. So whether a good is normal or inferior, that can depend upon the culture or the overall level of wealth of a country. Now with inferior goods, the demand goes up if your income goes down. So if bus tickets are an inferior good, then if something happened to the economy of a city and it made the average person poorer, we would predict that demand would shift to the right, that demand would increase. Lots of other things can affect the demand for a product. Advertising can affect demand. This is why companies spend so much money on advertising, because they think that by advertising they can shift out or increase the demand for their products. Weather can affect demand. I imagine when it's really hot out, people are more likely to buy ice cream, even if the price of ice cream doesn't change. Fashion trends can affect demand, as can health news. If there's a widely reported result that apples are healthier than previously thought, that's probably going to increase the demand for apples. Lots and lots of other things can affect demand curves. Remember, when we draw a demand curve, though, we're holding all of these other things constant. And if we change something that affects quantity demanded, that isn't the price of the good, then we have to move to an entirely new demand curve. Thank you for listening.